Revelation chapter 2 and verse 8. Unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of those things which you're about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. And you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. The church of Smyrna, of the seven churches that letters were written to, Smyrna was one of the only two that Jesus did not find anything to correct. A little history of the church at Smyrna. They were in a place where emperor worship was forced upon the people. They were forced to worship Caesar or die. The Jewish religion was recognized, but Christians were not recognized. Jews did not have the civil commitments and the punishment upon them, making them worship the emperor, but Christians did, because they were not considered Jewish. There were informers that if someone did not worship the emperor, if someone worshiped another god, if Christians worshiped, they were informed on by those informants for worshiping other gods and not just worshiping Caesar. For the most part, this is the way most of them were caught, when somebody informed on them and told the government that they were worshiping other gods, that they were Christians. They were charged and executed. Most of the informers in Smyrna were Jews. And we'll hit that again in just a minute. Prison was just a holding place till they went to trial. Then when they went to trial, they were executed immediately. Sometimes the same day. So prison just held them till they went through the trial and were executed. And we see what Jesus said to the church at Smyrna. And that gives us a little understanding of why he said what he said. First of all, he told them, he identified himself, Jesus identified himself as the speaker. Says these things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. We know that's Jesus. He is the one speaking. He said, I know your works and your tribulation. He says, I see your works. But yet he didn't find any fault with their works. One of two churches that Jesus didn't find any fault with their works. Last week, Ephesus, he said, you left your first love. They had plenty of works, but they weren't doing them from a heart of love because they had left their first love. But here, he said, I know your works. And he says, I know your tribulation. I see what you're going through. We need to understand, whatever we go through, God knows we're going through it. Whatever we face, he knows it's coming before it gets there. He's not blind to it. He knows where we are and what we are going through. Then he says, I know your poverty, but you are rich. They didn't have much money. They didn't have a lot of possessions, but they were rich in the things of God. They were rich in his love. They were rich in his mercy, rich in his grace, rich in his power. They had the things of the kingdom. A big contrast from the church of Laodicea, the last letter in Revelation 3:17. To the church of Laodicea, he says, because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. The church at Laodicea said, we got everything. We don't have any problems. There's nothing wrong. But Jesus said, there's everything wrong spiritually. You're poor, wretched, blind, miserable, and naked spiritually. Physically, they were clothed. Physically, they could see. But spiritually, they were lacking in everything. But he said to Smyrna, you may be lacking in the physical things. You may be lacking financially. You may be lacking in possessions. But you are rich in God. That's the most important place to be rich, is in God. Doesn't matter if you don't have a dime to your name. If you've got Jesus, you've got everything. And he is the one that will help us and supply our needs. Doesn't say he'll make us rich. But he says when we seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, he said all these things will be added to us. What things? Housing, food, clothing. You know, you may not wear designer jeans. I buy mine at Walmart. I buy the Walmart brand, Faded Glory. I don't need designer jeans. They fit just fine. They last just as long. It don't matter to me if they look just as good or not. But God supplies the need. And he will supply the need. Even though we may not have everything in this world, we've got him. We are rich in him. Then he says, I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. I know those that say they're Jews. They're Jews by nationality. They might even be Jews by religion. But he said they're not true Jews of the heart. For the true Jew, the true circumcision is the circumcision of the heart. It tells us in Romans that when we get saved, God does a work in our hearts to make us that new creature. There is a change in our heart. God does a circumcision in our heart. That is what makes us a true Jew. He said those that say they're Jews, they're not. They're of the synagogue of Satan. Why? They were informing on the Christians, having the Christians put in prison and then executed. It says, do not fear any of those things that you're about to suffer. He was telling him right there. First he said, I know your tribulation. I know what you're already going through. Right here he's saying, get ready. You're going to go through some more. You're going to go through something more, something different. Don't fear it. Don't worry about it. I'm sure the Old Testament stories, well, I don't want to say stories, accounts, were real and alive in the minds of those at the church of Smyrna. They remembered how the word says that the three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to bow and were cast in the fiery furnace. But God went into the furnace with them. Jesus was there. Nebuchadnezzar looked and said, didn't we cast 3 men in? He said, I see 4 walking around free. He cast them in bound. He saw the 4th man in the fire. Jesus was there with them. They knew about Daniel that was cast into a lion's den, a den of lions that had been starved, not been fed for days. They were hungry. But God sent his angel to shut the mouths of the lions. One of the bishops, in fact, looking at the accounts, he could have actually been the bishop at the church at that time, Polycarp. He could have been the one that was there. It was in his lifetime. He was there in AD 108. A letter was mailed to him from Constantinople that identified as him being the bishop in AD 108. Revelation was written in AD 95. That's only 13 years. Polycarp was killed 86 years after his conversion, but they were going to burn him by fire. And when they couldn't burn him by fire, they finally had to kill him by throwing a spear into him and killing him. The fire had no harm on him. There's been things, Facebook, people have been posting stories there. There was some people in Africa that the ISIS had come after them. And they had weapons trying to kill them. A lion, or 3 lions, came and attacked the ISIS people. Run them off. And looked at the Christians and turned around and walked off. And the kicker is there weren't supposed to be any lions in that part of the country. You see, God still does today what he did back then. He did it way back in the book of Daniel. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He did it for martyrs in the early church right after the apostles. He'll still do it today. We just need to put our trust in him. He said, don't fear any of those things that are coming your way. Don't fear any of those things that you're about to suffer. Yes, the devil may throw some of you into prison that you may be tested. And you'll have tribulation 10 days. What he's saying there, you're going to be thrown in jail. You might be there 5 or 10 days, but that's it. And like I said, if they're in there for not worshiping the emperor, they're tried and they're killed. He said, you got to go through 10 days of trouble. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about those 10 days. It says, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. What he's saying to them, that's only a short time of what you're going to go through something. But you be faithful unto death. You be faithful till you die. And you're going to receive a crown of life for eternity. We need to understand that what we go through in this world is only for a short time. Even if we're here 70 or 80 years, compared to eternity, that's nothing. I said before, you take one grain of sand off the beach. Compared to the rest of the beach, as far as you can see, that one grain of sand is nothing. That's what our life amounts to on this earth when we compare it to eternity. It's just one little grain of sand compared to the rest of the sand as far as you can see on the beach. Our life is but for a moment. And when this life on earth is over and we know the Lord, we step into eternity forever and ever. No end. He said, 10 days you're going to be in prison. While you're in prison those 10 days, you're going to be tested. You're going to have tribulation. Think about those two things. A test and tribulation or trials. Sometimes what we go through are both. We're going through a trial, but we're also being tested. We go through things. This letter to the church at Smyrna is particularly important for our day. You know, everybody thought, well, this election, get Trump in there, everything's going to be smooth. One man doesn't change it. I mean, we got a Congress in there, and the Republicans don't even agree with their own president, the president for their own party. They won't pass anything. Democrats don't care. The press, this president has been attacked more than any other president I have ever seen in the short time he has been in office. You know, they have a way of wording things. I saw a thing where it said that the United States decided to share with Russia some of the intelligence that they received from Syria. Now, that was top secret stuff. But they shared it with Russia. But it was okay because Obama was president and the press was behind him. Well, Trump had a Russian ambassador in his Oval Office. And now they're saying that he's guilty of treason because he shared some top secret things with the Russian ambassador. It's just the way that it's worded. But one man is not going to change this nation. There's only one that can change this nation and turn this nation around. And that's God. And that's only going to be when the people of God get serious, get on their knees, and begin to pray like they have never prayed before. But most churches, people are too busy with what's going on outside in the world. They're too busy living their lives. They're too busy worrying about their own problems. They're too busy to take the time and pray like they need to, that this nation will turn around. But I believe also we are living in the last days when this thing's winding down. We need to take to heart what he said to the church of Smyrna. Jesus said this in Matthew 24, verses 9 and 10. He says, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. The key thing in there I want you to see, will be hated of all nations for my name's sake. The most hated religion in the world is Christianity. The last 3 years, it's been the most persecuted religion in the world. People in this country, they did a survey. The majority of people are more tolerant toward Islam than they are Christianity. They would rather see Islam in this country than Christianity. Hated for his namesake. People don't like Christians much anymore in this world. They believe the lie. They think that Islam is the peaceable people. They think because we don't agree with things that are going on, and they call us as our haters. Our haters. I watched some of those movies about the end. The Tribulation series of movies called Tribulation. The ones that, I can't remember the name of them now, that Kurt Cameron played in about the rapture. In those movies, they called the Christians haters. Isn't it amazing that the same thing that was portrayed in those movies is happening today? That people are calling Christians haters because they don't agree with them. Those people that are supposed to be tolerant toward everything, when a Christian disagrees with them, suddenly they become intolerant with Christians. Folks, we're in the last days. These things being delivered up for tribulation. Some are already being killed. In the Middle East, they're being beheaded if they don't deny their faith. How long do you think it's going to take? It's already happened a few times in this country. How long do you think it's till it's going to happen here more and more? Matthew 10:21 and 22. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But he who endures to the end, the same shall be saved. Jesus is saying the same thing to us that he said to the church at Smyrna. Don't fear the things that are coming on you, but endure unto death, and you'll receive the crown of life. He's saying it's going to get to the place that family members are going to turn on family members. They're going to turn them in to be arrested and to be killed. You're going to be hated for my name's sake. But he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. Doesn't matter how fast you started. It's how long you hang on that matters. You've got to hang on until the end. He that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. Verse 11. He ends the letter. He said, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now that just jumped out at me this week. I've seen that he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says. But notice what it says to the churches, plural. You see, these letters were sent to be read by all the churches. The 7 churches, all 7 churches got a copy of the book of Revelation. And particularly, all 7 churches got a copy of the letters. Now, why is he saying, he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches? They're in Smyrna. What does it matter to them what he's saying to Laodicea and Ephesus and Pergamos, all the other 6 churches? Very simple. The same thing that happened to them, the other 6, can happen in Smyrna if they don't watch out, if they don't stand guard. You know, Jesus lived 33 years, AD 33, somewhere around there, he was crucified. Revelation was written in AD 95. That's 62 years. 62 years from the time that Jesus walked this earth, did mighty signs, wonders, and miracles, that the church of Laodicea said we're rich and increased with goods and are in need of nothing. And Jesus said, you're poor, wretched, blind, and miserable. 62 years. And they drifted that far. We need to pay attention to what Jesus says to every one of these churches. These were 7 actual churches in Asia Minor at the time. This was their condition. But I believe also in the day that we are living in, there are churches that fit the examples of each one of these 7 churches. We need to look and see, am I there? Is that me? Does that apply to me? Is that where I'm at? And we might get hit with more than 1 or 2 of them. But we need to be ready, not walking in fear, but we need to be walking as close to God as we possibly can in this day that we are living in. You know, when bad things start to happen, it says they're going to happen suddenly. And some of the things that he says is going to happen, that happens suddenly, is just the beginning of sorrows. But he that hath ears, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Read your letter and pay attention to it, and read the rest of them and pay attention to them too. We need to pay attention to all of them. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. If we are found faithful and we overcome, we don't have to worry about the second death. The second death is being cast into the pits of hell, which is really not death. It's a spiritual death of sorts, but it's eternal torment forever and ever and ever. Just as long as the righteous are in heaven, the evil are going to be in hell and torment. No burning up. I wonder what they're going to say after 1,000 years in hell. Remember that song that used to be out, 10,000 years, and we just begun to praise his name. What about somebody who's been in hell for 10,000 years and they just begin to suffer torment? It's just beginning. I wonder what they will say about the little bit of pleasure they had in this life for a short time, if all the torment and punishment they're going through was worth it. I'm pretty sure what the answer will be. The Bible tells us that we need to make our calling and election sure. We need to know that we know that we know that we are on our way to heaven, that we are right with God, and that our life is demonstrating what we confess. Because it doesn't matter what you say, you're going to do what you are. Let's all stand.